This happened a few years ago to me, when I was still living in my childhood home down in California. I had just inherited my family home, so my cousin decided to move in with my husband and I while she was attending a college nearby. My cousin and I were both working at the Lego store at the time, but I only worked mornings, and my husband and cousin worked nights, so there were many nights where I was alone. A couple of weeks before this happened, I had been taking stuff out to my car when I realized a strange brown van with no back windows parked across the street. As I put the stuff in the trunk, the man in the van started making weird noises at me. I turned to see if I could get a look at his face, but his black Giants baseball cap was pulled down really far. Thinking he was just a creepy guy, I flipped him off and went back into the house. About 2 hours later, I went outside to go somewhere, and he was still parked across the street. Not thinking anything of it, I hopped in my car and headed to my friend's house. As I was driving, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the same brown van following me. I turned on a whole bunch of streets, and he followed me down all of them. I turned onto the road that my father-in-law lived on and parked, thinking if the guy tried anything, I could just run there and be safe. When I pulled over in front of my father-in-law's house, the van slowly drove by. I looked into the van, and the man put his hand into a gun position and pointed at me and said, "Bang," really loudly. After that, he hauled ass and drove off. Now, I had always been a little leery of staying home alone. My house had always given me the creeps because of how poorly lit it was. When I was alone at night, I usually just stayed in the kitchen because of how bright it was. I was watching a TV show on my computer when all of a sudden, I hear a banging on the front door, and the handle jiggling. It startled me for a moment until I looked at the time and saw it was around 10 p.m. and knew my cousin was going to be coming home from work about that time. I got up and opened the door, but nobody was on the porch. I shouted my cousin's name out, but still no response. I called my cousin's cell, and immediately she said, "Oh hey, I'm on my way home from work right now." Before I could say anything else, there was 3 extremely loud bangs on the door that connected the kitchen and the garage, and the knob was shaken violently. I slammed the front door closed, locked it, and chained it, and ran for my room. My aunt called me while my cousin called the police, and I stayed under a blanket until my cousin arrived. When she came home and got me, I was led outside to talk to the police. I was trying to explain what had happened, but the officers along the side of my house were distracting me. I walked over to where they were, but one of the police officers held me back. They opened the gate and saw that the door to my garage was wide open, which we always leave locked. All of the officers in the area pulled out their guns and went into the garage, but nobody was in there. Afterwards, the police told me it was probably just some kids messing around, but if I ever get scared at home, to just call them, and they'll send someone out. About a week later, I was watching something in my living room with my cousin and my husband. As I was passing by the window next to my front door, I realized there was a guy wearing the same baseball cap as the guy in the van standing outside on the sidewalk, staring at the house. When he noticed me watching, he immediately locked eyes with me and slowly gave me the creepiest smile I had ever seen. I turned and yelled for my husband to go out there, but when I turned around, he was gone. I will say though, the baseball cap in question is really generic, and a lot of Giants fans wear it, so I can't say it was the same exact guy, but I felt like it was. 3 days after that, I was home alone at night again. I was on edge, but I was trying to ignore it, telling myself that I was going to be okay. I was baking cookies in the kitchen when I thought I heard a knock at my sliding glass door. My whole body tensed up, and I slowly turned towards the door. The lights in the backyard were off, and the kitchen ones were on, so the glare on the window made it impossible to see if someone was outside. Everything was silent for a few seconds before someone banged on the door again. I screamed, but felt paralyzed in fear. The person ran on the deck from the sliding glass door to the 2 windows in the living room and started knocking on them as well. They came back to the sliding glass door to knock and started trying to open the door. I finally came to my senses, grabbed my keys, and ran outside into my car. I locked myself in my car and dialed 911. We sold our house shortly after that. I still have a hard time staying home alone, even though I'm 2 states away now. This story took place when I was 18 and still living at my parents' house. I'm currently 23. My parents live in a very rural part of Michigan off a main highway. In fact, from the big window in the living room, you can watch the cars drive by on the highway. The closest neighbors to my parents are probably about a half a mile away, separated by thick woods. On this night, both of my parents were working late shifts, and my dad was due to arrive home soon from his lunch break. I wrapped up in a blanket and was watching TV in our living room while listening to the rain and snow combination hit the windows. This was around 9 o'clock at night and was late fall, so very dark and very cold. My dad stayed home for his hour lunch and then left to go back to work. Soon after pulling out of the driveway, he called my phone and told me to look out the big living room window under the street light on the highway and see if I notice anything out of place. Immediately, I notice a figure sitting on the side of the highway under the street light. I asked my dad if I should call 911 and get an officer out to check on this person. I was worried they could be injured or possibly an elderly person who didn't know where they were. He said yes. I called 911. I talked to a dispatcher about getting an officer out to check on this person, and they hung up after she said someone was on their way. I sat in the window watching this person, waiting for the officer to show up, when they stood up and began dancing under the streetlight in the middle of the road. The way this person danced immediately sent chills down my spine. By this time, it was around 10 p.m. and snowing heavily, and this person was slow dancing in the middle of the highway like they didn't have a care in the world. After a couple minutes of dancing in the road, they stopped, went across the highway, and began sprinting down my driveway. At this point, I was terrified. I called 911 dispatch back and told them that this person was no longer on the highway, but was walking down my driveway. They advised me to make sure all the doors are locked and to keep an eye on this person so we could tell the officers when they got there. At this point, dispatch offered to stay on the phone with me until officers arrived, since this person was entering my yard and I was home alone. I ran to my kitchen window, which faced my driveway, and couldn't see this person anywhere. I'm panicking at this point because I had no idea where this person was or what their motives were. All I knew was that they were in my yard somewhere in the darkness. As I'm looking out the window, this person walked directly in front of the window and went over to the garage. I moved windows once again, since the window on the front door faces the garage. I finally got a good look at this person thanks to the yard light. He was late 20s, very scruffy, carrying a backpack, and talking very absurd to himself. I relayed everything I saw to 911 dispatch, including that this man was attempting to break into my garage. Dispatch tells me that the officers are turning down my driveway and asked me exactly where this man was. I told them that he was trying to break into my garage, and the officers were able to restrain, cuff, and put him in the back of the cop car. One of the officers then came to talk to me and explained that the man was very strung out on drugs and had various rocks and knives in his backpack. They reassured me that he would be spending some time in jail, and I could feel safe spending most nights alone. I'm not really sure what this man's intentions were, but I'm happy the officers got there when they did. So, I'm a 24-year-old male. I've lived alone for about 2 years now. I have a very small bungalow I'm able to comfortably afford. In this bungalow, I have an attic area. I'd say it's about 5 by 5 meters in size, and you can only really stand in there in the very center. Anyway, I work the night shift at a factory. I was coming home last Thursday during a heavy storm, and I got into the house and just went to sleep. When I woke up, I went on my phone and saw that I was so tired that I didn't check my notifications. I have a Ring camera outside my door, which shows me anyone who would have come to my room. I saw that it had been tripped at 7:42 a.m. I got into the house at around 8:10 to 15 a.m. I checked the video and saw that it was a man. He was pressed right up to the door and was fumbling around with the handle. He did this for about 10 seconds until he spotted the camera. Once he did, he very quickly scuttled away. This unsettled me, but didn't entirely creep me out or anything. I got up to go make some food and discovered something in my kitchen. My back window was open. I of course instantly began having the thoughts of a home intruder, but slowly chilled out as I convinced myself I had left it open. The rest of the day consisted of this, just noticing small things that didn't seem right and scaring myself, all up until a point. I leave for the shift at 10 p.m., and I was watching some TV around 9 o'clock. I spotted something that made my heart leap into my throat. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see it. My attic entrance was slowly being slid open. I can so vividly remember that I began questioning my sanity. Surely I was just hallucinating or something. I looked over at it and absolutely saw something that made me so much more scared. I saw fingers wrapped around the hatch and began moving it around more. I didn't know what to do. I could feel the panic beginning to really get to me, and I wasn't sure if I should leave the house and call the police, or if I should try and yell at whoever was up there. I chose a mixture of both. I began calling the cops and ran to my bedroom where I could lock the door. As soon as I began running, I heard the hatch almost get torn off with the speed they moved it. As I arrived at my bedroom door, I looked down the corridor and watched for a second. Seeing only a slice of the darkness up in my attic, I saw the human hands still holding onto the sides of my ceiling. I yelled, "Whoever is there, I am calling the police and I have a gun. If you take a step out of there, I will f***ing shoot you." I don't actually own a gun. The adrenaline was really making my hands and voice shake, but I tried sounding as tough as I could. Then I saw something that I truly do not think I will ever forget. The hand slipped back into the dark, and then he dropped down. I slammed my door shut and locked it as quickly as I could. The call went through, and I was able to get on a line with the police, and they dispatched officers to my house. I told them I didn't know if the man was armed or not, and the dispatcher told me to stay on the line. I heard the man walking up to my door and rattling the door handle. He also seemingly went through my cupboards in my kitchen, as I heard a lot of commotion there. I don't know why he stayed. I would have just left the house, but he stayed right up until the police came in and arrested him. Apparently, he was a homeless man and was armed with a knife from my kitchen and had recently been seen in the area trying to get into other houses. I'm very frightened to sleep still. I now sleep with my bedroom door locked and all my windows closed. I also sleep with a knife under my pillow. I know that this is unlikely to ever happen again, but I just cannot forget the way he dropped down from my attic.